Night on First at 9 this Thursday, 6th of June 2024. Approved. Sri Lanka's telecoms regulator grants preliminary approval to satellite-based internet service Starlink. Tariff reduction. Electricity tariff reduction from July onwards. Proposal to be submitted to the Public Utilities Commission. CEB divestment. The new electricity reform bill passed with a majority of 44 votes.
I wish to inform that the bill titled Sri Lanka Electricity read it in third time and passed with amendments.
Overrule. Supreme Court reverses former President Maithripala Sirisena's presidential pardon granted to the Royal Park murder convict in 2019.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබා ගත හැක.
From Derana, this is Derana First at 9 with Indivadi Amuata. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a very warm welcome. You're joining us once again on Derana, your primetime English news service First at 9. And we'll take you through the top stories making headlines tonight. Highlighting that former President Maithripala Sirisena has violated the Constitution, the Supreme Court quashed the former President's order to grant a presidential pardon to Royal Park murder convict Jude Shamantha Jama. Delivering the verdict of the case, the judge bench pronounced the former president's actions have led to violations of Articles 12.1 on the public right to equality and 34.1 on the procedures to be followed in granting a presidential pardon per the Constitution. The country's apex court ordered the former president to pay a compensation of 1 million rupees to the petitioners and 1 million rupees each to the mother and father of 19-year-old Yvonne Johnson, the victim of the Royal Park murder. The court ordered the Attorney General to take necessary legal measures for the extradition of Jude Shamantha, who is currently overseas.
In 2012, Jude Shamantha Jama was sentenced to death by the High Court of Colombo over the murder of Yvonne Johnson at the Royal Park condominium complex in Rajagiriya in 2005. 7 years later, in November 2019, he was granted the presidential pardon of Maithripala Sirisena during his last week in office as president. However, in 2022, the Women and Media Collective Organization filed a fundamental rights petition before the Supreme Court challenging the legality of former President Sirisena's decision to grant presidential pardon to the Royal Park murder convict. Their FAR petition was filed naming the Attorney General, Jude Shamantha Jama, Commissioner General of Prisons, Controller General of Immigration and Immigration, Inspector General of Police, Minister of Justice and President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka as respondents. On the 24th of July last year, the Supreme Court concluded its hearing on the fundamental rights petition and directed written submissions to be filed before the 25th of August. The country's apex court stated that the verdict would be delivered in due course. After over 3 months, the verdict of the case was delivered today by a 3-member Supreme Court bench comprising Justices S. Raja, Yasantha Kodagoda and Janak De Silva. While highlighting that there is due process to be followed prior to the grant of presidential pardon to a convict, which includes calling for a report from the justices who named the suspect a convict, calling for a report from the Attorney General and obtaining recommendations from the Minister of Justice, Justice S. Raja is of the view that former President Maithripala Sirisena has failed to follow due procedure. Justice Yasantha Kodagoda, meanwhile, is of the view that the presidential pardon was granted by former President Sirisena based on personal requests made by parliamentarian Venerable Athureli Ratanathera, respondent to the petition Jude Shamantha and his parents, and added that he has misused his power and acted in negligence without adhering to the constitutional provisions. In his decision, Justice Janak De Silva said the former president has failed to explain the circumstances under which the presidential pardon was granted, adding that it amounts to the misuse of his power. While highlighting that the former president's action have led to violations of Article 12.1 and 34.1 of the Constitution, the 3-member judge bench quashed the order to grant a presidential pardon by former President Maithripala Sirisena to Royal Park murder convict Jude Shamantha Jama. The Supreme Court also ordered that former President Maithripala Sirisena should pay a compensation of 1 million rupees to the petitioner and 1 million rupees each to the mother and father of the victim of the Royal Park murder. Further, the country's apex court ordered the Attorney General to take necessary legal measures for the extradition of the defendant, who is currently overseas.
Less sugar, same great taste. from Melbourne. ජීවිතේ හැම තැනකදීම ස්මාර්ට් වෙන්න පොලිය විතරක් ගෙවාගෙන යන්න CDB Smart Draft.
The Sri Lanka Electricity Reform Bill passed by a majority of 44 votes following the debate held in Parliament today. During the division at the end of the debate on the second reading of the bill, 59 votes were cast against, while 103 votes were cast in favour. The Act is expected to establish independent and accountable corporate entities, promote competition, ensure consumer protection, and facilitate the growth of renewable energy.
Supreme උසාවිය කිව්වා ආණ්ඩු ක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවේ 12 වගන්තියට
The Supreme Court said that this entire bill is against the Constitution. There are 54 clauses and out of them it has been decided to amend 13. The government will be there for only 2 or 3 months. The next government will face the consequences of this act.
ගන්න කණ්ඩායමට තමයි මේකේ ප්‍රශ්න ඇති වෙන්නේ. නීත්‍යානුකූලව පනත ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න ඕන කරුණු සියල්ලම
We have completed all the legal requirements. I'm sad to see that there are lawyers who cannot clearly read the verdict of the Supreme Court. There are many advocates and President's Council in the opposition said to have worked in the legal system for over 2 decades. If they can't understand the Supreme Court decision, they should relinquish their titles. If there are any legal issues, they can challenge it.
නීත්‍යානුකූලව ගැටලුවක් තියෙනවා තුමන්ලට අභියෝග කරන්න පුළුවන්.
මේගොල්ලෝ රට බංකොලොත් කරපු නිසා තමයි මේවා විකුණන්නේ. ඔයගොල්ලෝ බංකොලොත් කරුවානේ. සල්ලි නෑ දැන්. සතේ අතේ නෑ.
මේකට මීට වැඩි බලතල දෙන්න ඕනේ කියලා විපක්ෂයෙන් යෝජනා වුණා. සියලුම දෙනා පක්ෂ වෙලා මේ වෙලාවේ වෙන දෙයක් කරන හරිය අසාධාරණයි.
මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ 19 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය සම්මත කළේ එක දවසේ.
විපක්ෂේන මන්ත්‍රීවරු සමහරවිට අපිට
Some opposition MPs call us and say this must be done. In the blueprint published by the main opposition, the SJB, it says that we need to bring in more private investment and competition. That is what we have done now. Meanwhile, there is a group in the NPP who says that they are not like the SJB. In the recent past, they blame me for including the word least economic cost instead of least cost. However, in the NPP manifesto, they have used the phrase least economic cost. What is the difference in this? I do not know whether this is an issue occurred during translation. They blamed us, saying we were trying to connect our grid with India. In their manifesto, they are connecting with the Bimstec electricity supergrid. Many try to interpret this reform as a reform bringing in to sell the CEB. I challenge you to show me a single clause that mentions selling. The majority of officials and employees are in favor of these reforms. They know that they were also tricked by a group of people. We have assured that all the permanent employees of the CEB will remain even after the transition.
දැනට බඳවාගෙන ඉන්න ස්ථිර සේවයේ ඉන්න සියලු දෙනාට ඊළඟ සමාගම් බවට පරිවර්තන වෙනකොට අපි ඉවත් කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. ඔබතුමා අපේ ස්ථාවරය ගැන කිව්වා.
You talked about the SJB opinion. Yes, to a certain extent we are in favor of this reform. We also showed that even in the NPP manifesto, they talked about this change. However, Mahinda Rajapaksa recently said that he is against divestment or privatization. If that is the case, how can the majority of the SLPP MPs vote in favor of this?
මේ පනත සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම නිහඬයි.
This act is completely silent when it comes to the subsidiaries of the CEB. These subsidiaries are worth billions of rupees. What will happen to the shares of these companies? A dangerous situation is being created because of this. These amendments create the opportunity for the minister to sell these shares at cheap prices.
රාජ්‍ය කොටස් තමන්ගේ හිතුමතේට කුණු කොල්ලට අලෙවි කිරීමේ ප්‍රවණතාවය වැඩි වෙනවා.
පුද්ගලිකංශේ
Even though they say this is to bring in competition, it is against that as well. This is a reform brought in to sell the energy sector to India's Adani Corporation. There is nothing to hide here.
තීරණ ගන්නකොට පාරිභෝගිකයා
We are proposing several amendments to bill in order to protect consumers. We hope the minister will accept these proposed amendments. If that happens, then we can go ahead with you.
නෙවෙයි කියලා. එහෙම වුණොත් අපිට මේ ගමන ඔබත් එක්ක යන්න හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා.
During the tally, 103 parliamentarians voted in favour of the bill, while 59 voted against. As such, the second reading of the bill was passed by a majority of 44 votes. The third reading of the bill, meanwhile, was passed with the amendments that were added during the committee stage.
I wish to inform that the bill titled Sri Lanka Electricity read it in third time and passed with amendments.
මැලිබන් කිරි නිෂ්පාදන මිලදීගෙන මරණයට කැපවූ කිරි ගවයන් නිදහස් කර ගැනීමට ඔබත් දායක වන්න.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara revealed that it has been proposed that electricity tariffs be reduced by the 1st of July. Speaking during today's parliamentary session, Vijayasekara said that the new tariff revision is expected to provide more relief to consumers of the domestic category and that the relevant proposal will be submitted to the Public Utilities Commission.
According to Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Vijayasekara, the unit price for the public that consumes between 0 and 30 units of electricity will be reduced to 6 rupees from its current price of 8 rupees under the electricity tariff revision proposed by the Ceylon Electricity Board. Under the revision, the unit price for consumers using between 30 and 60 units, which currently stands at 20 rupees, will be reduced to 9 rupees. Further, the 30 rupee unit price that existed for the members of public that consumes between 60 and 90 units will be reduced by 12 rupees to 18 rupees. Consumers who use between 90 and 120 units will see their unit price reduced to 30 rupees from the previous price of 50 rupees.
එතන අපේ පාරිභෝගිකයෝ ලක්ෂ 68ක් ඉන්නවා.
We have 6.8 million users. Out of that number, relief will be provided to over 4 million consumers. We will also provide relief for religious institutions based on the number of electricity units they consume. Similar revisions will be introduced to small-scale industries, schools and healthcare institutions that fall under the general purpose category. We will forward the proposal to the Public Utilities Commission tomorrow or on Monday. Following its consideration, the PUCSL can implement the revision on the 1st of July. If they believe that more relief can be provided, we are ready to support them. We are providing these reliefs by improving our efficiency, not by adding more power plants to the grid. The only power plant we added was Umaoya, and its benefits can be passed on to consumers. If we want to reduce the electricity tariff further, we need to construct low-cost power plants. We need investors for that. However, once we attract investors, we are questioned about how we did that.
මේක පුදුම රටක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
In our developing story, the Department of Irrigation says that with the reduction in rainfall, water levels of rivers have begun to subside, reducing the risk of flooding in the northwestern part of Sri Lanka. However, the Disaster Management Centre estimates that over 280,000 people across 23 districts are affected by floods as well as earth slips and landslides prompted by the torrential rains. Against this backdrop, State Minister of Defence and Disaster Management Pramitha Bandara Tennakoon stated that the government will provide a special allowance of 10,000 rupees each to families who have been affected by flooding.
The Department of Irrigation reports that the water levels of the rivers in the southwestern part of the country have begun to subside with a temporary reduction in rainfall. However, a number of localities remain inundated. Several low-lying areas in the vicinity of the river Kalu, including Horanabulat Sinhala Road, remain submerged. Meanwhile, several areas in Galle, including Baddagama, Agaliya and Dodangoda, remain inundated owing to the high water levels of the Ging River. Flooding prevented several schools in the district from opening. Overflow from the river Nilvala continued to affect a number of localities in the Matara district, including Kadduwa, Katuwangoda and Aturaliya. A number of landslides and tree collapses were reported in several areas. Meanwhile, a 17-year-old from the Ganegama area in Baddagama was reported dead after being drowned. The latest reports from the Disaster Management Centre estimate that 284,505 individuals belonging to 74,313 families across 23 districts are affected by the adverse weather. 12,638 of those individuals are being temporarily housed in 204 relief centres. 31 deaths have been reported while the number of missing persons stands at 3. Against this backdrop, the government has decided to provide a special allowance to households affected by flooding.
10,000 rupees will be provided to every family affected by floods in order to clean up their houses. The government has allocated 150 million rupees for this purpose, and the relevant funds will be provided to district secretariats.
Health officials warn that prevailing flood conditions may result in an increase in the spread of infectious diseases.
As mosquito populations increase during the monsoon rains, we see an increase in the number of dengue patients. We expect these numbers to increase further because of the prevailing floods.
In the meantime, the National Building Research Organisation issued landslide early warnings to several districts. Accordingly, Level 1 watch warnings have been issued for several areas in the Colombo, Kalutara, Galle, Hambantota, Matara, Kandy, Kegol and Ratnapura districts, while level 2 alert warnings have been issued to areas in the Kalutara and Ratnapura districts. The Department of Meteorology meanwhile forecasts light showers in several districts.
We expect several rounds of showers in the western, Sabargama, southern and northwestern provinces, as well as the Kandy and Noralia districts. Also, there is a possibility of showers in the north and northwestern provinces. Showers or thunder showers may occur in the Uva and eastern provinces during the evening or at night.
Manusad Derana continued to provide relief to the people affected by heavy weather for a fourth consecutive day. Accordingly, dry rations were distributed by the Manusad Derana team among people affected in the Malvana, Ratnapura and Kalutara areas both yesterday and today. Dry rations were donated to the Sri Sumangala Pirivena in Ratnapura to be distributed among people affected by the inclement weather. Further, dry rations were donated to the Sri Lanka Vidyalaya Maha Pirivena in Kalutara to be provided to the people affected by the disaster. The program is carried out by Manusad Derana in partnership with Dialogue. Also making headline news today, President Ranil Wickremesinghe highlights that tropical countries must secure their own funding to manage climate change effectively without relying on or expecting the necessary funds from developed nations. While addressing the World Environment Day celebration in Colombo yesterday, the President said that by doing so, tropical countries can contribute significantly to global climate control. The head of state emphasized that Sri Lanka's approach to climate change and environmental issues goes beyond traditional programs and that it is an integral part of the country's national policy. The President revealed that the government plans to establish a University of Climate Change in Sri Lanka by June 2025.
The national celebration of World Environment Day was held at the Presidential Secretariat yesterday under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe. During the event, President Wickremesinghe signed the Gazette announcement declaring Varnagalawatta an environmental protection zone, and the first issue of the Soba magazine was presented to the President.
When we look at the global environmental crisis, what we see is that we can't expect to fulfill the objectives of the Paris Agreement. If we are to achieve those objectives, there are a few programs that we would need to initiate. First, we have mentioned achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in the recently presented Economic Transformation Bill. After this bill is passed, it will become a national policy. Then we should bring amendments to the current Environment Act. We will bring in those amendments after we pass the Economic Transformation Bill. We are working on introducing the Climate Change Act and the Act to establish the Climate Change Centre. Once these drafts are enacted, Sri Lanka will have a fundamental legal framework addressing environmental and climate change issues. We are taking significant steps to establish the University of Climate Change as a key initiative. We have engaged in discussions with several countries and secured 600 acres of land in the Kotmale area for this purpose. The draft plan will be completed next month, followed by discussions with relevant international organizations. We aim to have this initiative legalized by June next year. Many developing countries are requesting financial assistance, citing a lack of funds. However, I believe not every country needs to take this approach. We have requested the cancellation of existing debts for economically underdeveloped countries in Africa. We will seek to generate the needed money within our own countries. Several companies are actively working to obtain carbon credits, particularly in the environmental sector. For this, we have created the Tropical Belt Initiative.
Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe inaugurated his new political office in Colombo today. The President's media division said that the office, located on Sir Ernest de Silva Mawata, will serve as the centre for future political operations. The establishment of the office was initiated by United National Party Chairman MP Vajira Abewardena.
Also making news tonight, a teenage schoolboy reportedly died after being assaulted by another student during a tuition class at Sipikulam in the Hambantota Police Division yesterday. Police have arrested a 17-year-old student in connection with the incident. Here's a look at some local news in brief.
The Homicide and Organised Criminal Investigation Division officials arrested two associates of Alan Goran Jyoti Ruben and Tushara Lakmal, two key figures leading crime and drug networks in Sri Lanka while residing abroad. The suspects were arrested while hiding in a house in Avisabella. Meanwhile, Dambulla public inspectors, during a raid on a large-scale rice mill in Dambulla, discovered paddy unsuitable for human consumption being made into rice. Dambulla public health inspectors disclosed that the rice mill had been importing rice illegally. In other news, a search operation conducted by the Sri Lanka Navy in Nagarkovil in Jaffna has led to the apprehension of two suspects aged 34 and 40 and a dinghy loaded with over 70 kilograms of Kerala cannabis. The gross street value of Kerala cannabis seized in this operation is estimated to be over 28 million rupees. The Navy said that the accused, along with Kerala cannabis and the dinghy, were handed over to the custody of Maruthankani police.
Welcome back. We take you to your headline-making business news. Sri Lanka has given preliminary approval to Starlink, the satellite unit of Elon Musk's SpaceX, to provide satellite-based internet services in Sri Lanka. The Telecommunications Regulatory Commission approval process was expedited after Elon Musk met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe last month in Indonesia on the sidelines of the 10th World Water Forum. State Minister of Technology Kanaka Herath, addressing media today, said that a 2-week period has been allocated for a formal public consultation process.
On the 19th of May, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who visited Indonesia to address the 10th World Water Summit, met with Elon Musk to discuss the implementation of the Starlink service in Sri Lanka. Starlink is a satellite network developed by the private spaceflight company SpaceX, owned by Musk, that aims to provide global coverage, extending internet connectivity to even the most remote corners of the planet. During the meeting, it was emphasized that Sri Lanka is committed to expediting the application process to connect the country to the global Starlink network. Following this development, State Minister of Technology Kanaka Herath revealed that Starlink has formally applied for authorization and that the government is actively evaluating its proposal. Speaking to Ada Derana last week, the State Minister said the Telecommunication Regulatory Commission will be meeting to discuss the matter pertaining to the nature of the license that will be granted to Starlink. In its latest development today, the State Minister revealed that the TRCSL has granted preliminary approval for Starlink to provide satellite-based internet services in Sri Lanka.
According to the Telecommunication Act, Section 22, the Commission has granted preliminary approval for Starlink to start operations in Sri Lanka, and also there will be 14 days for public consultation. This will benefit education sector, industries, fisheries, and also research. And we have requested concessions for rural schools also. So hopefully when this approval is granted, we'll be having connections within the rural areas as well.
Under the Telecommunication Act of Sri Lanka, the types of permits are limited. We issue telecommunication system licenses under Section 17 of the Telecommunication Act, but under new amendment, we have expanded the scopes of the licenses. Now we are introducing a new telecommunication infrastructure service providing license and also telecommunication service provider license, and also another one for cable landing stations. With the expansion of the scope of the licensing, this will definitely fall under the telecommunication service provider license. We are very hopeful about the amendment. Now it's already presented in Parliament. If the amendment gets through during the process, we'll be able to straight away issue the telecommunication service provider license to Starlink.
Now, the Colombo Bourse surged with a notable gain of over 100 points today during today's market session for a third consecutive day of gains. The broader all-share price index closed at 12,310, gaining 120.93 points. High net worth and institutional investor participation was noted in Pan Asia Banking Corporation, Sampath Bank and Hatton National Bank. Turnover stood at 1.5 billion rupees with a 25.4% increase from the previous trading session. Banking sector was the top contributor to turnover, while the sector index gained 2.02%. Capital goods was the second highest contributor to turnover, while the sector index increased 1.05%. Net foreign outflow was recorded at 30 million rupees. In corporate affairs, Capital Alliance introduced the online application Cal Online 2.0 to promote digital investment banking in Sri Lanka. During the event to launch the mobile application, Capital Alliance also announced the launch of their financial literacy initiative, Think Thrice, a campaign aimed at educating retail investors.
The launch of Capital Alliance's online application, Cal Online 2.0, which focused on digital investment banking, was held in Colombo last evening.
Sri Lanka currently has 700,000 plus CDS accounts. Now these CDS accounts are managed across 26 different brokerages by a total of 321 registered investment advisors. If we look at Sri Lanka's unit trust industry, the total AUM in unit trusts in Sri Lanka is equivalent to 1.8% of our GDP. Now in India, this number is 14%. That's a huge difference. And treasuries markets as well, the 1 million and above investment requirement is prohibitive for many retail investors. So when we take these three things together, it's very clear for us to see that there are still extremely high barriers to entry for retail investors to our capital markets. And that is where Cal 2.0 comes into the picture.
Let's say a retail investor living in Kampara or Vaunia or Trincomalee, if he or she wanted to invest in the capital markets and wanted to open an account, typically back then what you would have to do is take a day or two of your busy schedule, find an institute like this, financial institute. There'll be a lot of unknowns in terms of documentation. The process itself would be intimidating. It's a very disadvantageous to the retail investor. Our purpose was to address each of these pain points and provide the convenience to each of these customers in Sri Lanka.
Capital Alliance also announced the launch of their financial literacy initiative, Think Thrice, a campaign aimed at educating retail investors.
We are starting off this campaign to kind of educate our retail investors in particular in terms of the know-how and what they need to kind of look at when they are making the investments, and how critical is it to invest in a scheme which is registered by the central bank and is authorized, and there's a proper investment process behind it before you make an investment decision.
We operate in frontier markets. Our market is 200 million people between Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, and we want to grow into other frontier markets. And our purpose is to develop capital markets in these frontier economies, because we believe strongly that prosperity is only possible through the development of these capital markets and by enlisting people to participate in these capital markets.
Well, that's all from us here tonight. Have a pleasant evening. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time. Good night.